I was in that comment was the efforts by some to turn legitimate oversight activity into unwarranted.
We appreciate there's a
criticism
lot
of the FBI for the FBI doing nothing but doing its job.
There's a lot of us up here that don't like Congress particularly too. So I would there's probably a lot of the American people, the vast majority, would agree with you on that. Mr. Strzok, you were removed from the Mueller investigation, correct?
Yes.
But for the most part, all the others that were there are still there, correct?
I can't speak to the current staffing.
Well, let me tell you who they are. Greg Andrus, who gave $1,000 to the Democrat running to hold the Senate seat previously held by Barack Obama, and $2,600 to Democrat Senator Gillibrand, and $0 to the Trump campaign. He's still there. And Rush Atkinson, who donated to the Clinton campaign, and $0 to the Trump campaign. He's still there. Kennedy Freeney, who contributed to both the Obama presidential campaigns and the Hillary Clinton's campaign, and $0 to the Trump campaign. Still there. Andrew Goldstein, who donated $3,300 to both Obama campaigns and $0 to the Trump campaign, still there. And Elizabeth Prelogger, who, by the way, clerked for Liberal Supreme Court Justices Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Elena Kagan, and contributed to both the Obama and Clinton campaigns, and $0 to the Trump campaign, still there. And James Quarles, who contributed to the Democratic presidential campaigns of Dukakis and Gore and Kerry and Obama and Hillary Clinton. Now, he didn't contribute to former Congressman Chaffetz and Allen, but he contributed $20,000 to the Democratic Senate campaign committees, $0 to the Trump campaign. I could go on, but I'm just about to run out of time. Suffice it to say that 9 of the 16 investigators still on the case gave to Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or to both, and none gave to Trump. Now, shouldn't such a wide disparity in political support of one party over the other give the American people concern that even though you are off the Mueller team, that the fairness and lack of bias that President Trump deserves and the American people deserve just might be lacking here?
The gentleman's out of time, but the witness may answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, what I'd tell you is this, and what I'd ask you to tell your constituents is this. I have and had no idea what contributions were made by anybody staffing the special counsel's office. What I can tell you and what I'd ask you to relay to your constituents is the men and women that I saw, the attorneys, the agents, the analysts, were the most remarkable, bright, patriotic, hardworking people that I've ever had the honor of working with. I want you to know, and whether people leave here believing me or not, I was absolutely and remained absolutely convinced that the efforts and the personnel who make up the offices of the special counsel are the best in America. And I have complete faith and confidence that they will arrive at the truth and that they will do that well.
Gentleman from Ohio yields back. The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Strzok, I don't know where to start. If I could give you a Purple Heart, I would. You deserve one. This has been an attack on you in a way to attack Mr. Mueller and the investigation that is to get at Russia collusion involved in our election, which is what this committee should be looking at. A direct strike at democracy and what this country's about, and free and fair elections, keeping us independent of who is our foe. I just returned from the OSCE in Berlin, and there is little question among our allies and people and diplomats throughout Europe that Russia is an antagonistic country that is trying to wreak havoc in the Baltics, in the Balkans as well. They tried to use assassination to try to influence the elections in Montenegro, what they've done in Ukraine with Crimea and the Donbass, what they've done in Georgia, what they've done in Moldova. They are the bad guys. And you've dedicated most of your life to working in counterintelligence. One of your big cases, I think, was Donald Heathfield and Tracy Ann Foley. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was how many Russian folks did you expose and bring to justice?
Well, that was a long, large investigation that a tremendous number of extraordinary people worked on. There were ultimately, I believe, 10 roughly Russian illegals that were here, but I started out in the early days and was honored to start out, and again, that ran a decade.
And how many Russians were deported for that?
Sir, if memory serves, 10 or 11, but I'm not certain on that number.
Pretty good case that you worked on. A good job.
Case.
Did you work on Russia primarily when you were at the FBI in that area?
At that period, early on, yes.
Are there some things you can tell us about the Russians that maybe we should know before the president meets with Mr. Putin, his very good friend, and a man he cannot say anything bad about?
Well, sir, I can speak to my experience as a national security professional in the FBI. The Russians are a top-rate adversary in terms of their foreign intelligence service, in terms of how competently they are able to use their intelligence service to achieve their foreign policy and national security goals. Many of which you referenced, their desire, the threat from NATO, trying to undermine the Western alliance, trying to minimize the role and leadership of the United States around the world, attempting to minimize and undermine the extraordinary greatness of our democracy, to make it seem pedestrian and nothing special and on par with their kleptocracy and near dictatorship that they have, to somehow make us seem less. But that's my perspective. I wouldn't presume to get into a foreign policy.
They engage occasionally in assassination
they do.
Political rivals?
Yes.
An arrest of journalists for maybe talking and writing about things that the state doesn't believe in?
Yes.
It's not America.
Not at all.
Well, that's unfortunately what the Mueller investigation is looking into, is Russian collusion to influence our election and to influence our politics. And you have dedicated your life to working against that type of involvement and against that type of effort to subvert our democracy and to undermine it. I thank you for that. It's astonishing to me that you would be put on trial as you have today. The beginning of this discussion, this committee meeting, somebody said, we don't want young people to look at the front pages constantly and see things about the FBI that's putting the FBI and the Justice Department in questions and on the front page. Well, I would submit to this committee that the people who are putting that on the front page is this committee, and the people who won't accept what the investigator general said, that there was no bias involved in the actions of you or others that were investigated. There was found no evidence that the conclusions by the prosecutors were affected by bias or other improper considerations. Rather, we determined they were based on the prosecutor's assessment of the facts, the law, and past department practice. With that as a fact, there's no reason for this hearing. No reason at all. But it puts it on the front page again and again and again. And as you said earlier, the Russians are loving it because this is what they want. This is what they want. You'd think it was Benghazi. It was a never-ending television show from Congress that got nowhere except tried to influence the people that watch Fox News. And that's what this is about. And this is really unfortunate. And as they say, you could put lipstick on a pig, but this is nothing but a ruse to try to get to the Mueller investigation and make people think it's baseless, that it's biased, that it's 13 Democrats that are working on this, and they're prejudiced and they're discriminatory and they're biased because they, just as Jack Nicholson said in the movie, A Few Good Men, you can't handle the truth. And the truth is, this is the most corrupt administration ever, and it's going to be exposed by Robert Mueller. Thank God. I yield back, and I thank you.
The gentleman from Tennessee yields back. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Chairman. Agent Strzok, did you provide any information to reporters, journalists, or media personalities about anything related to Trump-Russia investigation in 2016, 17, or 18?
No.
Did the press ever talk to you, Agent Strzok, about this issue? Did they ever come to you?
The Trump-Russia collusion investigation?
Did the press ever come to you? I'm asking first, did you talk to them? I'm asking now, did they ever come to you about anything related to Trump-Russia investigation in 2016, 2017, or 2018?
I received a number of calls from various members of the media, particularly when I returned from the Office of Special Counsel. In every instance, I referred.
Prior to going on the Special Counsel team, did you get any inquiries from the press that you took?
Not that I took. I referred them to the Office of Public Affairs of the FBI.
Have you read the dossier?
I have.
Okay, and you wrote about it too, didn't you?
I don't know what you mean by writing about it.
We got an email that you sent. It should be presented there, or should be in front of you there. I want you to take a look at this. This is an email you wrote to Lisa Page, Bill Priestap, Jim Baker, Jim Rubicki, and CC'd Andy McCabe. Subject line is BuzzFeed's about to publish the dossier. You familiar with this email?
I am.
All right. Says this: comparing now, the set is only identical to what McCain had. Parentheses, it has differences from what was given to us by Korn and Simpson. Did you write all that?
Congressman, let me answer it this way. The first, if I could address the chairman. Over the break, I was authorized by the general counsel.
Hang on a second. I just want my time stopped if you could. Are you addressing me or the chairman?
I'd like to address the chairman because this is all going to come together in an answer.
Is there a question you want to direct?
No, it's something I wanted to answer your question from earlier based on something I've been told by the FBI.
Wait.
I think I'm aware of what the FBI told you, and I will have another chance to talk about that. But right now, the gentleman from Ohio controls the time.
You wrote this. That was the question.
So obviously,
wait. Do you see the from?
So Congressman, here's
you see the from line? Do you see the from line?
Congressman, I do.
It says
and I
Peter
understand
Strzok.
this.
And then it says to Lisa Page and a whole bunch of other key people at the FBI. So did you write it?
I did write this.
All right, let me ask you a couple questions about it. It has differences from what was given to us by Korn and Simpson. Who's Korn?
Sir, to answer that question, and I would love to answer that question, and every part of me, and you know why I'd want to answer that question because you have this information.
Who's Simpson?
I have been, sir, if I may, I cannot answer that question.
You wrote about it. It's now public. Who's Korn? Who's Simpson?
Based on direction by the FBI, sir, I am not able to answer questions about ongoing investigative matters.
I just want to figure this out. Agent Strzok. You're referencing 3 copies of the dossier. The BuzzFeed copy you have, the one John McCain's staff gave to you, and the one that you said you got from Korn and Simpson. The one McCain gave to you and the one BuzzFeed has are identical in your words, but they have the Korn and Simpson one is different.
Sir,
this is kind of important.
It is important, and I want to answer your question. And here's the position that I'm in, Congressman. I have been directed. May I answer your question?
Mr. Chairman, may the witness be permitted
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jordan repeatedly asks a question, doesn't let him answer it.
The gentleman from Ohio controls the time.
I have been directed that I may state that I have read the dossier, that I read the dossier as it came in parts and pieces.
You've already told me you read it. And I want to know who Korn and Simpson are.
And sir, what I'm telling you is that I have been directed I may not state the various places where the FBI
let me ask you this. I got it. I know what you're saying. Did you ever communicate with David Korn?
No.
Did you ever communicate with Glenn Simpson?
No.
Did you ever communicate with Nellie Orr?
No.
Did you ever communicate with Bruce Orr?
Yes.
When did you communicate with Bruce Orr?
My recollection is somewhere between possibly 3 or 4 or 5 times in the late 2016, early 2017 timeframe.
What did you talk about?
We talked about investigative matters that Mr. Orr was involved in.
Did you talk about the investigation we're focused on here, Agent Strzok?
My direction from the FBI is that I may not answer that question, sir.
I got it. Let's go back to the email that you sent that you won't talk about. Are there 3 copies of the dossier as evidenced by what you said in this email?
Sir, to be clear, I want to talk about this email. I want nothing more than
all
answer your
you
question
want, but
because
you're not talking about it. You're not answering my questions. Are there 3 copies?
3 copies of what?
The McCain copy, the BuzzFeed copy, and the one that you got from Korn and Simpson.
Sir, the most I can say is we received a variety of copies of and different types of
Let me ask you one other question. Glenn Simpson testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee on August 22nd, 2017. He was asked, did anyone from Fusion ever communicate with the FBI? His response, no. No one from Fusion ever spoke with the FBI. So here's what I'm having trouble understanding. If Glenn Simpson says no one ever spoke with the FBI, how is it that you got a copy of the dossier from Simpson?
Sir, I can tell you I never had contact with Fusion, with Mr. Simpson, with Mr. Korn. And again, sir.
Chairman, regular order. The gentleman will have a few more seconds since he was interrupted.
Well, I mean, this is the frustration that every single member of this committee feels is when Agent Strzok won't answer, well, more importantly, the American people feel when Agent Strzok won't answer fundamental questions like the guy he references in an email, Korn and Simpson, and won't tell me who they are. This is unbelievable, but that's where it's gotten to now, and it's as frustrating as it can get, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
Briefly.
Sir, it is as frustrating to me as it is to you. I can tell you, sir, that I would love.
You know what, Agent Strzok?
Mr. Chairman, may the witness be permitted to answer.
If it's so, if
Gentlemen will suspend.
If it's so frustrating, answer the question.
If you'll allow him to, I'm sure he will.
He has never answered the question who Brewer and Simpson
interrupting
are.
him.
We're about
The gentleman instruct the gentleman from Ohio to stop badgering and allow him to answer the question.
We're about to move on. The gentleman from Ohio's time's expired. And we're about to move on where Mr. Strzok can answer a question that he refused to answer earlier on advice of counsel. And I'm going to yield to Mr. Gowdy for the purpose of doing that right now.
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Gowdy starts, may I respond to Mr. Jordan?
Very briefly.
Very briefly, sir. I would love to do that. There is an appropriate time for oversight, and as you well know, that is at the end of an investigation once it's concluded. I am certain Congress will absolutely have the opportunity to look at any investigation once it's closed, ask all these questions, and I would love to answer each and every one of your questions
Mr.
once
Strzok,
the FBI allows me in the investigation.
We already know that answer from you, and you have already been advised that you can answer the questions here, because guess what? This is the United States Congress where you're testifying, not under the jurisdiction of the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Mr. Chairman, we cannot be asking about an ongoing investigation that is sabotaging an ongoing investigation by this committee, and that's what he's not cooperating with, and we should not do it.
It is,
and he cannot cooperating with that.
It is. These questions are table-setting questions regarding the formation of this, and he can answer those questions, but
he cannot answer questions
he's been
regarding an ongoing
advised by the FBI
investigation.
that he can, and so Mr.
He's
Gowdy's
been advised by the FBI that he cannot.
No, he's been advised that he can, and Mr. Gowdy's going to again ask his question.
Gentleman from Ohio has asked for 15 seconds.
So, Agent Strzok, who's being square here? Glenn Simpson says no one from Fusion spoke with the FBI. You say in your email, we got a copy of the dossier from Simpson.
Mr. Chairman, regular order.
We will have regular order, and we'll revisit that question. Now the chair recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina.
Agent Strzok, between July 31st, 2016 and August
Mr. Chairman,
6th.
regular order.
This is regular order. The gentleman refused to answer the question earlier. He has now been advised, and I have been advised by the FBI that he may answer the question that was in order earlier, and he's now going to answer the question.
But, Mr. Chairman, Republicans have controlled the time. Now the time goes to the Democrats.
The gentleman will be recognized shortly.
Agent Strzok, between July 31st, 2016 and August 6th, 2016, how many witness interviews did you conduct as part of the Russia-Trump campaign alleged collusion investigation?
I don't recall, and I'd have to check the case file.
We waited all that time for that answer?
Yes, sir.
That's eerily similar to what you said a couple hours ago.
Sir, I am telling you, and I would reject the characterization that I refuse to answer anything. I want to answer these questions.
Well,
I'm going by the direction that I received from the FBI.
I just asked you one, and I'm looking for a number.
Sir, and my answer
looking for a number.
I do not know without the opportunity to check the case file.
You don't recall in the first week of an investigation that you originated, approved, or the contact person on, you don't recall how many witness interviews you did in the first week?
Sir, I remember that there were interviews conducted. I do not know when they fell on a calendar to be able to tell you whether they were in any set of date or the other on something that was occurring in the context of a myriad other responsibilities.
When's the last time you looked at the file, Agent Strzok?
Probably going on a year.
For those of us who happened to look at it yesterday, would you disagree that the first interview took place on August the 11th?
I don't know, Congressman. I cannot answer that.
Well, prior to July 31st, 2016, how many witness interviews did you conduct as part of the Russia-Trump campaign alleged collusion investigation?
None.
So none before July 31st, which would be none at the time you said what you said in that text on July 21st.
I don't understand the text you're referring to.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. This is on our time.
Well, no, there are two more questions he didn't.
All right.
He wouldn't answer.
The gentleman will continue.
Between May 17th.
Explain why he can continue in our time.
He can. He's not on your time.
Not my personally Democratic time.
It's on our time because he was advised earlier by the FBI that he could not answer the questions, and now he's advised that he can. So the questions will be asked and answered.
Between May 17th.
Parliamentary inquiry, what rules are we following that would dictate such an answer by you, Mr. Chairman?
We are following the rules of the committee.
Could you cite the rule?
No.
No.
Gentlemen will proceed.
Just, Mr. Chairman, point of parliamentary inquiry.
This seems to be well.
We're gonna the Democrats.
Mr. Chairman, point of parliamentary inquiry
can continue, but when you do, and the FBI tells him he can't answer a question, and then they change their mind and says he can, we're going to take the time out to do that, and then we're going to continue.
Mr. Chairman, point of parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman
Democratic
from South
members
Carolina
have a
is
right to know what the rules are in governing this hearing.
Gentlemen,
can you share with us
the
the
gentleman
rules
is not
that
in
you're
order.
making up as you go along?
Agent Strzok, between May 17th, 2017 and May 18th, 2017, how many interviews did you conduct as part of the special counsel team?
I don't believe I conducted any.
Between May 17th, 2017 and May 22nd, 2017, how many witness interviews did you conduct in that 5-day period?
Well, so you just went back a year from 2018 to 2017, and I don't know.
2017, May 17th, 2017,
Okay.
May 22nd, 2017.
Yeah, I believe you may have said 18, but 17, I don't know.
Whether I did or not, it's the 17th, 2017.
Fair enough, and I don't recall.
Well, Chairman, I appreciate you letting me make that clear. And again, the context when you would not answer it was you used the word impeachment on May the 18th, 2017, and you used the word impeachment on May the 22nd, 2017. And your testimony is you can't recall a single interview you would have done as part of that investigation that was supposed to lead to impeachment. And I think that line of questioning, I'm glad the FBI finally realized it, albeit a couple hours too late. When you are prejudging not just a result, but a punishment, which is what impeachment is. When you are prejudging the conviction and the sentencing when you have not conducted a single solitary interview. I'm sorry, Agent Strzok, but that is letting your bias impact your professional judgment.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
Briefly.
Sir, so look, I never prejudged anything. Not in this case, not in any others.
Impeachment for what, Agent Strzok? Impeachment for what?
Second
Of order, Mr. Chairman, what are the rules here? Mr. Chairman, what are the rules? The gentleman will allow the witness to answer the question, and then we'll move on.
Second,
He was given time to respond, and
the
now he's...
notion, at the time I was a deputy assistant director, I have section chiefs, unit chiefs in the field, supervisors, agents, people who typically do interviews, not me. If something is notable or high level, I might be involved, but it would be rare, if never, that I would typically get out there and conduct interviews, first of all. Second, you mentioned the use of the word impeachment. That was used in the context of my not knowing what this would lead to. I was not prejudging impeachment. When I used that term, it was saying it might do nothing.
Please.
It might lead all the way to something on the other.
Thank you, Agent Strzok.
Agent
The
Strzok,
chair now
kidding?
recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay.
Thank you,
5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, and Special Agent Strzok. I just continue to be amazed that my colleagues in the majority are more interested in your text messages than they are about the leader of the free world doing everything possible to undermine the Western Alliance. It just amazes me, Special Agent Strzok. As a counterintelligence specialist, you know all too well the pervasive, constant, and growing danger that the Russian Federation poses to this country, our allies, and to democracy in general. It is appalling that my colleagues in the majority continue to relitigate the 2016 election while the president does more damage in the to the Western Alliance than the sum total of all previous Russian and Soviet leaders could have dreamed of. And it is remarkable that Mr. Trump accused our trusted ally Germany of being, and I quote, totally under the control of Russia. I would say that the president is half right. Someone is totally under control of Russia, but it's not Germany. You know, the president should look in the mirror and explain why virtually every decision he makes and every word he utters weakens our key friends, erodes our strategic alliances, and strengthens our most dangerous adversary. Mr. Strzok, can you offer an explanation as to why the president is so eager to punish our allies and please Vladimir Putin?
Sir, I wouldn't presume to do that, no.
All right, let me move on to the meeting of June the 9th, 2016 in Trump Tower. We have a series of emails in front of us, one from Rob Goldstein, who told Donald Trump Jr. that the Crown Prosecutor of Russia met with Aras Agalarov this morning, and in their meeting offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia and be very useful to your father. And he says this is obviously very high level and sensitive information, but it's part of Russia and its government support for Mr. Trump. Mr. Strzok, without commenting specifically on these emails or this instance, can you explain generally from a counterintelligence perspective why it would be concerning that high-level campaign aides would be meeting with a representative from a hostile foreign government. What would be the risk?
Well, again, not relating it to any particular event. I think the hypothetical would be enormously concerning because a hostile foreign power, one, by definition of that hostility is their national interests are adverse to ours. The fact that people would be meeting or attempting to work together implicates a variety of potential criminal violations. I think it would give concern about the motivations and the actions of the people involved and whether or not, whose interest, whether America's or that hostile foreign powers they were truly working towards.
And when campaigns are given defensive counterintelligence briefings, are they generally instructed to report foreign interference attempts to the FBI?
That is typically part of a CI defensive briefing, yes.
I want to thank you so much for your responses and your patience. And you know, today's hearing is a sorry display on the part of my Republican colleagues who have put the defense of the president over the ultimate responsibility we in Congress have to protect our national security. All of you should be ashamed of yourself. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To start this off, I'd like to yield to the gentleman from South Carolina for a brief presentation.
Thank the gentleman from Iowa. Agent Strzok, do you have your text in front of you?
I do not.
Can you, well, let me read one to you and you tell me whether or not you recall saying this. On May the 18th, 2017, who gives a, I'll give you a hint, starts with F, one more AD versus an investigation leading to, guess what that last word is?
Sorry, I recall the text, it's impeachment.
Impeachment. The day after Mueller was appointed. How about on May the 22nd? Do you remember that text? Do you have that one in front of you?
I do not.
Well, here, let me see if this refreshes your recollection. This is you in response to something Lisa Page sent you. I'm torn. I think, no, I'm more replaceable than you are in this. I'm the best for it, but there are others who can do it. Okay, you're different and more unique. This is yours, plus leaving an SC, having been an SC, resulting in an, guess what that next word is?
I'm sure you've got it, sir.
No, well, you wrote it.
Are you asking me what it's?
Yeah, what do you think it is?
I don't need to guess. Impeachment, sir.
Impeachment. 5 days. 5 days after Mueller has been appointed special counsel, and you're already talking about impeachment twice. I thank the gentleman from Iowa.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond, please?
The gentleman
at the conclusion of Mr. King's time, you may.
Mr. Strzok, I'm over here now to your left, and I wanted to point out that you repeatedly stated here before this committee that you separated out your personal beliefs from any action that you took. You'd agree with that, I'm confident. And as implausible as that sounds to us, we've listened to a dogmatic defense of the implausible argument that no matter how biased you were, no matter how profane in that bias you were, it didn't affect your judgment or your decisions. Now, that's a tough argument to make, but I recall your response to Mr. Duncan of Tennessee on that topic, and you said, I don't agree with the characterization of my views as biased. Do you hold with that position that your views are not biased, whether or not they colored your activities as an agent?
I believe they did not color them, and I believe they are not biased.
The derogatory texts that you delivered that have been before this committee for the better part of this day don't reflect a bias.
They don't, sir, and why? Because not a single representative or the IG has been able to demonstrate a single act, not one indicating bias. Not one.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Strzok. It's one thing to say that you found a way to wall off your bias, but it's not possible to take under oath and tell the American people in this committee that there's not bias. If there's never ever, there's the evidence of this bias is replete throughout this evidence, throughout these documents that we have. Let me take you another place. Were you involved in the questioning of Hillary Clinton on July 2nd, 2016?
Yes, I was. I'm pausing because I think it was second or third, but if you represent it's the second, it's the second.
The second is the date that I believe we worked with. But in any case, in that room, how many agents were in that room?
3, including myself.
And were there any other representatives of the executive branch of government?
There were.
And who were they?
5 attorneys from the Department of Justice.
5?
Yes, sir.
5 attorneys from the Department of Justice and 4 then from the FBI?
No, sir.
Including yourself?
No, sir. A total of 8 people.
3
DOJ
FBI,
attorneys,
5 DOJ.
agents.
And then the people in the room with Hillary Clinton were? Carol Mills,
Secretary
Heather
Clinton, 1, 2, 3, I believe 4 other attorneys, 4 or 5.
I see. And did you record any of that interview? And could you tell me how long that took?
We did not record it. My recollection is that it took several hours. I don't recall the exact time.
And what documents would you have that memorialize the interview?
An FD 302 is created based on the notes taken by the participants in the interview.
And how many of those 8 agents or officers had their notes that took notes in that room?
I don't know. I know the 2.
Do you have yours?
I did. I believe some, and I know the 2 agents did. I don't recall about the DOJ attorneys.
I want to ask you to reconstruct who were those agents.
There were 2 of the case agents assigned to the Clinton investigation.
And what are their names?
Sir, FBI policy.
I expected that answer. But I want to let you know, we must know who was in that room. And we must have access to those notes because that's what they used to compile the 302 report. Did you brief Director Comey on that 302 report?
Well, sir, 2 things. Going back to the 302, it is relying on notes, but it's also drafted based on the memories of the agents participating in it.
Notes and memory.
Notes are not complete. But yes, my recollection is I did brief Director Comey on the results of that interview.
And we will be asking for the specifics on that data that you are knowledgeable of. And I'd ask the chairman if you would be willing to issue a subpoena for the texts that Mr. Strzok testifies as are not work-related. I believe there's a very good chance they are work-related. And the balance of this for the information on who was in the room on that date when Hillary Clinton was interviewed, which officers from the FBI, which officers from the DOJ, and let's call them to this Congress and get their testimony on what took place inside that room, Mr. Chairman.
We will take your request under advisement. The time of the gentleman has expired. I told Mr. Strzok he could briefly respond to Mr. Gowdy's.
Sir, yes, thank you. And if I may, just briefly to Mr. King, sir, right? First, I am asserting to you that my personal belief did not constitute bias. Every American has political belief, every single one, and I would submit to you that the vast, vast majority of those people are not biased in that, and I'd like to make to you.
By your testimony, I'm free from that allegation for myself for life, Mr. Strzok.
Mr. Chairman, if I can respond to you, my mentions of the word impeachment, if you look at the selective text that you've chosen and you expand that look to others, you will see that in no way did I, in fact, which you've conspicuously omitted rather, statement I made and concerned that I'm not sure there's a big there. It clearly demonstrates, sir, I had prejudged nothing. What it clearly demonstrates was I was looking at one potential outcome being impeachment. I was simultaneously looking at the polar opposite outcome, that there might be nothing, that there might be no criminal activity whatsoever. And I think it's fair that you take texts in the totality of the context in which they're made.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.